Hello, everybody. Thank you for taking the time to watch this presentation that should hopefully answer some of your questions regarding the transition from recreational soccer to the competitive program. This is part 2 of a 3-part series, and we'll be covering why competitive soccer is a good choice and why the player pathway, works the way it does. Again, our hope is by the end of this series that our membership will be well armed to make the best possible soccer decision for their player and their family. In the description below, you'll find web links, including a link to the full presentation that covers everything regarding competitive soccer, and also to the first part of this series in case you'd like to get caught up. And if you have any questions that are not answered here, please feel free to reach out and we'll be happy to get you the information that you want. We're going to revisit the player pathway briefly here. We discussed this in part 1. Another way to think about today's subject is the concept of player progression. Breaking it down into as simple terms possible, we have beginner, intermediate, and advanced. And again, we're focusing on the advanced option here. And if you take the simplest terminology and you begin to apply them to age groups, the beginner programming is any in-house rec program ages 4 to 15, and then rec travel above the age of under 11. Intermediate is rec travel at the under 9 and under 10 age groups, as well as the advanced prep program at under 9 and under 10. AP could potentially fall into the advanced category, and a lot of what we discuss here applies to them as well. However, since they have the same training schedule and play in the same divisions as a rec travel team at this age, we'll categorize them as intermediate for today's purposes. They're also a lower price point. But advanced prep is designed to prepare your players for, you guessed it, the advanced program. And then, of course, we have advanced, otherwise known as competitive soccer, at the under 11 and older age groups. So in this first section, we'll begin talking about the timing so that people can begin having discussions and planning out their calendars. We're trying to get this information out well in advance so that people can have time to make good soccer decisions and have chances to ask questions. So we'll discuss age groups and transitions. We'll be discussing kick-arounds for the advanced prep program and tryouts for the competitive program. And then we'll also take a bird's eye view of how number of participants impacts opportunities down the road. So when you start thinking about kick-arounds and tryouts, these could be considered important dates, and I'm going to link them in the description below. And this is something that we recommend for everyone. It's free and it's fun. And just because a player comes out for an event, it doesn't commit them to anything. And parents are often surprised at just how not intimidating it is. Plus, it's another chance to ask questions, meet staff, and enjoy the lovely spring weather, and, oh yeah, play some soccer, right? And after the various player placement events occur, we begin to form teams. And one popular question that people have on the front end is, how many kids are on each team? Well, here we are. These are the 3 main transition windows. We have the advanced prep and intermediate window at under 9 and under 10. The teams will play 7v7. These are for players born in 2013 and 2012. The preferred roster size here are 9 and 10 players. We can absolutely get up to 11 or 12, but 9 and 10 is preferred. And then the ideal player pool is 30 players for 3 teams, 40 players for 4 teams. Once we hit the advanced and competitive ages at 11 and 12, they're still going to continue to play small-sided, but they play 9v9, so the rosters expand a little bit more. These are going to be players born in 2011 and 2010, and then preferred roster sizes here are 11 to 12 players. Again, we've got a little bit of wiggle room here, but the ideal player pool is 36 players for 3 teams or 45 players for 4 teams. And we can obviously take more here and there as needed. And then at under 13, they go 11v11. This is where we start to introduce the adult game to them. These are players born 2009 and earlier. And then the preferred roster sizes here are 15 to 16 players. We won't take a team of more than 18, and we try not to field a team of anything less than 14. And the ideal player pool here is 32 players for 2 teams or 48 players for 3 teams. So each player pool is primarily driven by the number of available participants. And you might ask yourself why that impacts you. So here is how we have to plan and forecast for years to come. For the example on the left, if we have a small player pool, 20 kids at under 9, that's 2 teams. The next year they're under 10s, 20 kids, 2 teams. The next year they're under 11. We can grow by 4 kids. We kind of have to. We still get 2 teams with 24 kids, same at under 12. And then at under 13, we have too many kids for 1 team and not enough kids for 2. And so we either have to grow by 8 players to get to our ideal roster sizes, or we have to condense down to 1 team. And as you can see, that's the top team. Now, attrition is present across all sports at every age group, but a smaller player pool means less kids playing soccer sooner, which will ultimately impact the opportunities for players at the older age groups. So let's look at example 2 on the right, a larger player pool. If we have 40 kids at under 9, we have 4 teams, and then they age into under 10, 4 teams still. As they move into under 11, 3 teams, under 12, 3 teams. And then when we get to under 13, then we have 2 very healthy, very viable teams. In example 2, we have more kids playing, and that gives us a greater flexibility, greater opportunity to be patient in the development, and more opportunities for more kids to play. And as we'll discuss next, those kids are the ones who tend to play soccer longer. And for some folks, they already know that competitive soccer is what they want, and that's fine. But for those of you considering your options or waiting, this is where we'll begin to talk about opportunity cost. And one of those things is going to be player attrition. And we're also going to harp on the player pathways. And then eventually we're going to talk about some player misconceptions when we get into our third part of the series. So when it comes to this element of player attrition, there is, across all sports, attrition. As we mentioned earlier, participation declines as players get older. People tend to gravitate toward what they feel good at or what they feel good doing, and kids specifically gravitate toward what their social circle is. And that's why we discuss competitive soccer as lasting friends and lasting memories. Those healthy teams stay together and they stay in touch years after they graduate soccer, or after they graduate high school. So I took some sample numbers for fall of 2020. And yes, it's an odd season anyway, but this is a pretty steady trend over the past decade. And I think that it paints the picture accurately for player attrition as we hit some of the natural transitions. For under 10 players in the CSA Front Range League, which we would consider beginner or intermediate, there are 73 teams across the state. For under 11 teams in the CSA Front Range League, so this is when competitive soccer is first made available per CSA, at under 11, these teams would now be considered beginner, and there isn't really an intermediate option, but there's only 16 teams. All right, so at the current fall of 2020, we had 73 teams. And then in the spring of 2021, one age group up, we have 16 teams. So where do all these players go? Well, they go to the advanced option for the most part, otherwise known as competitive soccer. If players follow teams, that's roughly 84% of players. And I have a suspicion that it's actually a touch higher than that. We as a club are one of the few clubs in the state that actually have an in-house option at these age groups, but a majority of players are going to go for the advanced option. So that last slide serves to show that there are still options for players who choose not to pursue soccer competitively. However, each decision compounds upon the previous decision, as we demonstrated earlier, but let's touch on it again. Obviously, we have to have enough players to form a team. Too many isn't optimal for training or for development, but sometimes it's a requirement with future planning in mind. But it isn't possible to form a team without enough players, and that's true across all programs and any team sport at any age. So example 1, at U11, we form 4 teams of 11 to play 9 aside. That's absolutely perfect. And then at under 13, we can get 3 teams of 15 when they transition to 11 aside. Well, I guess there's 1 team of 14, but that gives more players more opportunity to experience success and struggle at the appropriate level for them. In our second example, at under 11, 99, we were able to field 2 teams of 11, which is fine, right? Optimally, they're the right roster sizes. But when they get to under 13 and 11v11, we don't have enough qualified players to field 2 teams. And at a minimum, we need to grow. And most likely, we're going to grow by 6 players who missed 2 years of professional training, most likely to round out a second team, but more than likely will be at 1 team, which means that a minimum of 4 kids won't get to continue playing. So it impacts opportunities because it becomes increasingly difficult to place players at the older age groups. Maybe we have 2 teams at U11, U12, but if they're full, we need an entire new team to create space for new kids who want to enter the program. Once we hit the under 13 age group, if there's only 1 team available, and even if that 1 team is perfectly balanced and every player is able to contribute at the correct contribution level, that means that it will be nearly impossible for a player to jump from beginner to advanced within the club. And I won't say never, but it's pretty rare. Another way to consider this player pathway is that you can always try competitive and go back to recreational soccer. However, it's really difficult to ramp things up the other direction. So some people knew immediately this was the path they wanted to take, and some folks still aren't sure, and we'll discuss fears in the next video, and that's completely fine. But how can you get into the program? Well, we're going to be doing formal tryouts for the under 11s and older. That's going to start the week after Memorial Day. Again, there will be links in the description below. I'm also going to link a form down below for people who are anxious to get in and try out now. We can actually have your player out to train with the competitive group. That gives you guys another opportunity to meet the coach, meet the players, and just kind of get a general sense for how the program operates. And then we're going to be doing a number of kick-arounds for the under 9, under 10 age groups. Again, linked below. And then obviously you can always just reach out to any member of our team and we'll get you squared away. And maybe you have further questions, totally cool, feel free to ask. But who should be considering competitive soccer? Everyone. Everyone should be considering the program. Soccer is for everyone, and competitive soccer creates the most passion, which creates the most dedicated players. And we want players to play for their entire lives. So stay tuned for part 3, where we will be addressing a lot of the fears and misconceptions surrounding competitive soccer. As always, thank you so much for your time, and go green.